Welcome to WTF Web3, where we try and separate the crypto utility from the bullshit. We are focused on anything related to Web3 that really starts to show value and utility versus, multi-million-dollar ape cartoons. I am Chris Bruce. I'm one of the co-hosts. I'm a 5-time venture-backed founder, currently CEO and co-founder of a Web3 infrastructure company called Blockjoy. Previously, I was at Helium, which is another Web3 decentralized wireless company.
My name is Sean Carey. I also a 2-time founder, currently the co-founder and CTO of Blockjoy, a Web3 company. And I'm also the co-founder of Helium. On top of that, I spent most of my years working in the infrastructure world and helping companies like Giphy and Brightcove and PayPal and a bunch of other startups scale their infrastructure into the billions of requests. And that's really been my background over the last 25 years.
Today, let's talk a little bit about what we think the show is going to be about, what we plan to do, maybe talk about some projects that we're looking forward to discussing on the show and some people. So with that, Sean, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you think this podcast is going to be about, what your definition of Web3 is. Of course, that's probably the most important thing to start off with.
Yeah, absolutely. So my definition of Web3, it really, for the most important thing for me is that it doesn't, devolve down to the idea of the value of a token. But for me, it's the principle of what a blockchain-based or distributed ledger system is doing and what the value of it is. The value of this underlying technology and also the technologies that support it, it's for me is the most important thing. And I think that is the defining role of Web3. As a summary, if you look at we'll use a blockchain application and specifically, if you look at the purpose of the blockchain and what that blockchain does, for me, building tools and applications and contracts on top of those blockchains and getting a real world scenario and a real world use out of it. For me, that is from my concept of what Web3 is. Then you also have all of the services that support that and the infrastructural services, the data services and the APIs. Those are also Web3 services. And for me, that's kind of the encompassing idea. And I think the economics of it and the economics of what a blockchain creates, that's a secondary piece. And that's just created by the value of it. And I hope we spend a lot of time talking about that. And
yeah, so if we start with what Web 1 was, which we both were experienced engineers back then, working on stuff back in the original .com or .bomb era. Essentially, web was defined by static pages. But one interesting piece of Web 1 was this federated nature of a bunch of services. So FTP servers you can run, and you could store files for people. We would have, obviously, HTML and websites, but we also had things like Gopher. We had Finger. We had a bunch of interesting things. But you needed to know an address. You needed to follow hyperlinks. But the beauty of that was that everybody owned the servers that they hosted the stuff on. That was federated because people linked to other servers. Or if you looked at mail, email, that's another example of a federated system where you get a domain so that people can send you email and the computers work together, the different servers work together to route the message to you based on the domain. And so we see some of that today in Mastodon and some of these other things. But then if you fast forward to Web 2 was really highlighted by the fact that we went from these static web pages to much more dynamic web pages. They're interactive. You can actually do online banking. You could do e-commerce. Things like that were much better in the kind of Web 2 era where we started running JavaScript and we had Ajax and things like that can run on the client and actually make those experiences much more interactive and much more satisfying for users. At the same time, we started to see money pouring into the web, and we started to see search engine giants start to come up. We started to see a conglomeration of social media and things like that. It went from Yahoo to MSN, and we had stuff like Lycos and Alta Vista for search, and now it's Google. But what you've seen is over the years, everything's just consolidated to these centralized sources. And what's interesting, even email, which has historically been a federated thing, is now sort of shut down by spam filters and blacklists and things like this. And so even if you run your own server, it's going to take you 2 years to even get to where you can actually send mail. So it's even prohibitive now because you got companies like Google, which last I heard they had 3 billion Gmail addresses that have just sort of centralized and consolidated all these things. The other thing I will say that Web2 sort of highlights is the fact that your data is used to monetize. Basically people are building products and services where you feel like you're getting something for free, but in fact you are the product. And that sort of sucks because I think we're coming to this day and age where we're all suspicious the phones hear us talking about things because you talk about cats and next thing you know, you're getting ads for cat food. And it's just, it's very kind of disturbing to think that, people are invading into your privacy to make a profit. And it doesn't have to be that way. And if we fast forward to Web3, what I like to see Web3 be is really the decentralization of those core internet services that we've come to rely upon. So social networking, I'd like to see email go through an evolution, instant messaging, those things are kind of walled gardens now. And it would be nice if there was a decentralized approach. The other beauty of that is that all of today, web is all about somebody being in the middle, making a profit. They're making a profit off of selling ads, and then they're making profit by selling your data. And they're basically in the middle. And what I would like to see is the middle be cut out and people that have resources to contribute to the network get rewarded for that. And the people that come in and consume those resources on the network pay for them. And I'd like to see an ecosystem. And the beauty of that is any business could come in, build a business, and they don't have to be worrying about shutting out. And you see this playbook with Twitter and a lot of stuff where there's a public API that gets that service working. Same with Facebook API, all these things that had these great APIs to build, customer base and build it up. And once it got built up, they all got shut down. So entire businesses just were upended and out of business overnight because Twitter shut its API down because it wants to take over that. And you see Apple doing things like this too, where they have these great products and then they'll go and just develop a product and try and kill that. You see Facebook, if they can't buy it, they try and build it and compete. And so I'd like to see that go away. I'd like to see my data be in control myself. I'd like to see that I have a choice of where I want to share that data, and I'd like to do it in a manner where nobody really owns it. I own the data. And so I look at Web3 as really, again, a utility for these underlying core services of the internet that we've all come to rely on. Certainly don't see it as, $5 million ape cartoons or anything like that. But to be honest, NFTs, the underlying technology is valuable. Like we can see NFTs being maybe a replacement for the shit show that Ticketmaster is. So there's a lot of use cases that will eventually evolve, but unfortunately, the sort of get rich quick schemes of all these things have really kind of put a sort of bad taste in some people's mouths.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better, Chris. The looking at people being products, right? That's a huge thing, and I think a lot of people, and not just in our generation, but in every generation, especially the younger generation, are tired of being productized by these systems and these companies. And I think Web3 can hopefully help create the evolution of those things. And I'm just really excited to see where that goes, and I'm really excited to see the first real take or real software that can actually expand into taking over something like Twitter or taking over something like email. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. We both worked at Helium, which, if you don't know, I like to say is a good example of Web3. It's a utility. It basically rewards people to build a wireless network, and then people that actually consume data on the network pay. And in theory, it's a real market with no sort of centralized middle person there running the show. We both have experiences there, but what I would love is, are there any other projects that you've seen that look interesting to you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of projects. Some projects that I've seen. that I would really love to see. One would be distributed security or distributed security keys. And so, as a developer, Chris and I are both actually developers, and one of the things that we think about and talk about are like the secret network, where they're working on secure ways to exchange information. If there was a way for people not to have to use cloud services to acquire security tokens for their applications, but you could use a blockchain to do that. I think that's a great use case. So yeah, another system that I've been looking at that's quite interesting to me is the Lightning Network, and I've been spending time actually working to understand the best way to take advantage and use the Lightning Network to achieve faster payments on the Bitcoin protocol. And I think systems like that are going to be vital for the future of these systems, and the actual way that you can create P2P transactions, and the way that you can and the speed that you can do it, and the efficiency. If you can get up to something like MasterCard or Visa efficiency when you build these systems, it opens up the doors to be able to maybe not have to pay 6% every time you swipe your credit card at a Starbucks. And that's really, those things are really interesting to me. The other thing is anything that has an infrastructural point of view, anything that can actually help infrastructure or deploy applications, I find very interesting, because it would be nice for there to be a bulletproof way to just deploy a simple piece of code or your personal website. What would GeoCities look like, 20 years from now? That's what I want to see. Is I already know what it looked like 25 years ago, but I want to know what it could be 25 years from now. And maybe Tumblr was the last 10 years GeoCity. I don't know, but yeah, my focus is infrastructural, and this stuff really, really excites me.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your interest in infrastructure, there's a couple of cool projects out there. I mean, Dfinity is one that's very complex, but has some potential. There's also Pocket Networks, which is kind of a distributed API, which is very interesting, decentralized. So those are some things in your area that look pretty promising, and I think there's a few more coming up. You mentioned Secret. I really like the concept of Secret. It runs on secure enclaves and compute nodes, and so that's very interesting. And then there's a new protocol coming out called Nillion with an N. And they are building a sort of a mechanism to be able to share secrets and store secrets and stuff like that without a secure enclave, without physical like secure enabled hardware. So that's very interesting. There's just some new primitives there. It'd be great to have those folks on the show. Lens Protocol is another social networking protocol that's got some promise. Another one called DeSo, which I think is decentralized social. They have some interesting things. So yeah, I think we're gonna have some great projects to highlight on the show, and dive in and dig in and see what we can learn and share about those. What about are there any particular people in this space that are interesting? Like one person I would love, which I think is a long shot, but Moxy Marlinspike, who he wrote a pretty I would say damning article about Web3, and this idea that it should be the individual that can spin up a server and build a decentralized application. And he went off and tried it and realized at the end of the day nobody wants to run servers. He gave a pretty good series of examples of how people could run servers today, but they don't. My argument is it's still too hard today, and there's probably better ways to do it. But he would be one. So who else would be on your list?
Yeah, I like the Moxy example. I think the article was very truthful, and it'll be interesting to see how the world actually solves that problem, and hopefully there's like a link, if I like point up or something, my finger, there'll be like a link there for seeing that blog article. But yeah, other people I think that are interesting. I would say I look at it from the business perspective more than people, and I look at the problem that's being solved. Or the how the business is solving the problem. So I'll take a 200-year-old company, and you look at for instance, JP Morgan is a business, and they just sent their first cross what do you call it, continental or worldwide Polygon transaction, right? And you start to think, it's like, wow, is this, becoming a reality where banks are going to explore this enough, and banks will actually start using DeFi protocols, and who are those businesses that are cutting edge enough to actually start thinking ahead of all the other brick and mortar institutions and see the value. And I'm really excited to see that, where companies like JP Morgan, are interested in these types of things. Even though, like, if you look, Jamie Dimon, he totally craps on Bitcoin like once a week in a blog, publicly. But it's cool to see that there are actually people at JP Morgan that are thinking about this stuff, and they know where it's going. And the more support we get for that from the bigger institutions, I think the more rigid this stuff is going to become, and the more well defined it's going to become. There's going to be less rug pulls. There's going to be less theft, and there's going to be less SBF. And I think it'll be cool to see when that mass adoption starts to happen. So yeah, not really a person per se, Chris, but definitely there are businesses that I look at now and I say, okay, some people are starting to take this shit seriously, and that's what really excites me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe there's somebody at JP Morgan. I know that they have a blockchain team there, so and a crypto team. So that would be interesting. I mean, that would be great to have pundits like Jamie Dimon here.
I would love to.
Molly White is somebody who's pretty famous in the sort of critic of crypto, rightfully so in many cases. She runs a thing like Everything's Okay. Web3 Everything's Okay or something like that. It's on Twitter. But she does a lot of research in the area. She spoke at Solana Breakpoint this year, or last year, I should say. And she makes some good points. But it would also be good to have folks like that on the show, because at the end of the day, I want to see us sort of separate the utility from the bullshit. I want to understand the problems. There's lots of problems today with using a decentralized social network, for example. You certainly probably could not store the data on a blockchain as it exists today, because the blockchains are immutable. And if you're, a 13-year-old kid and you're posting some racy pictures, or, having a party or something, or doing something dumb, which, we all have done, and then you try to go get a job, how do you delete that? Unless you can be completely anonymous, so there's a lot of challenges to those types of things. I think they're all solvable, but I think it's good to surface those types of things. And we definitely have more than enough zealots and people that are proponents of it. So, I hope that as the show goes on, we bring some people that are pretty critical of Web3 in general, and, try and have good conversations about how, possibly we move it forward, or understand the problems and things like that. So that would be good.
Yeah, if you're on the JP Morgan Onyx team, call us.
Exactly.
My phone number's here.
No phone number will be there in the video portion of this or in the show notes, but definitely some interesting folks out there. So on that note, like what do you see the future of the show? Like, what do you think is some of our next topics should be? I think the goal of this is to try and put out some good content, maybe twice a week if we can pull it off. But do you have any ideas for the next show?
Yeah, I got a few ideas. There's a lot of people out there that have segued away from their traditional careers, and they've started to look at things like building dApps. There are people out that are, mathematics people. They're not developers, and they're doing all these analytics on blockchains. And these people are really interesting to me. And we do have a friend that we're actually, Chris and I both know, and he's a really interesting guy. He's a heavy metal guitarist, and now he builds dApps. And I'm hoping we can get somebody like that on here and get them to tell us their story of like how they left, playing in a rock band, and how their life transitioned into developing and working on Ethereum. And that could make for an interesting story. But also finding people that were really early days in blockchain, and I didn't believe the hype. So I'll be the first person to tell you, 10, 12 years ago, I didn't believe it, because everything was so surrounded by the value and the money. And so I was like, oh, this is dumb. It's just like another way to pyramid, right? My friend John Bonanza and Chris both got me turned on to blockchains when I started seeing the utility behind working with blockchains. And really that's, I want to see why other people are interested in that. And there's a bunch of people that were building semiconductors, that were writing software, that doing mathematics, and those are the people I want to know why that they stopped what they were doing and moved on. I even know somebody that's working on that fusion laser at Los Alamos, and on the side he's working on, he's doing blockchain work. And so, why is this so interesting to people? I that's what I want to explore, and I want to see, where the world can go in the next 20 years with this stuff.
Probably the early 2000s. I went to go join Sean Fanning, who created Napster, and John Bedanza, who was also part of early Napster and things like that. And we all started working on this project called Rupture, which eventually got acquired by Electronic Arts. And, God, these guys were quite funny. Vegetarians and vegans actually at the time. And, every time I went over, there would just be a pile of stinky food in the trash. The smoke alarm would always beep because they couldn't figure out how to change the batteries. And so, all of us working in this was Sean Fanning's loft. All of us working there just kind of tuned it out and ignored it. And so it'd be funny every time somebody new came over, they'd always ask what the beeping is. But anyhow, fast forward, John Bedanza, very interesting guy, but he got me into Bitcoin, and I bought some Bitcoin when it was like $1 something, like $1.20 maybe each, and I bought like $25 worth at Mt. Gox. Luckily, the Mt. Gox hack did not affect me because I had pulled all my Bitcoin into my own wallet. But unfortunately, at the time, it was just kind of this novelty, and I didn't take it too serious. And so I'm sure whatever those 16, 17 Bitcoin that I had are all gone now. They're sitting on some hard drive somewhere that's long gone. So, it's just one of those stories. But it's just, it's just kind of funny how these people get you into something early on as a novelty. You never know what's going to happen. And, in theory, it was super cool. But, I think back then it was the usability factor. And I think that's the problem that we still face today. I think that, if you talk about the classic crossing the chasm, the early adopters now are doing this. We're starting to see it's starting to transition over. But, the laggards are going to be far behind because, to use a wallet, to understand all this stuff is still complex. And so I think, in the next couple of years, I think we'll see a lot of improvements on the user experience. I think we'll, continue to position Web3 and stuff more towards the utility and the value. And so it should be interesting.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's funny, John Bedanza was also he's probably one of my best friends or my best friend. And he was the person that was my first exposure to Bitcoin also. And the reason why is he used to live off of Sutter and Polk, and there's a little sushi restaurant right there. And probably 12 years ago, they started accepting Bitcoin as payment. And he would go in there and I went in there with him that night and ordered a bunch of food, and he pulls his phone up and pays, and then we basically wait to make so they verify the tokens. And it was cool. I was just like, oh, that's neat, you can pay with something you mined off the internet. But I wouldn't have thought that 12 years ago that it would be where it is today, which is a really cool thing to see. And I think the world is going to absolutely go for a larger amount of adoption. You have some number, Chris. What's the number? How many wallets are out there? Do you have that number?
Last I heard, it's maybe the data's maybe 2 years old, but 80 million wallets out there, and that represents less than 3% of the entire population. So yeah, I'm sure the wallets addresses are coming up, but I haven't seen any later data than that. But I definitely think that there's a long way to go. I think it's cool that you can pay in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. It sucks because, I used to live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and I moved to Berlin with my family about 3 years ago. And there was a bar here that only took cryptocurrency, and it's been around forever. But, we had gotten here just as COVID hit. And so everything was kind of shut down, and the bar unfortunately went out of business probably because of COVID. And it's a shame because, I was looking forward to going there and spending, Ethereum, Bitcoin, whatever else I could. It would be super cool. But, it's very typical of Berlin. And if you think about, Polkadot and, Gavin Wood, which would be another great, the chances of us having him on here are probably slim to none, but he's just another great guy because he basically invented the term Web3, and he runs the Web3 Foundation. So it would be really cool to see what his thinking of Web3 was back then versus where it's at today. It would be really cool.
Oh, he's in Berlin, right?
Yeah. I mean, Polkadot, I don't know if he lives here. He's originally from the UK, but his, Polkadot and Substrate teams and stuff like that have been here in Berlin. So I think they're still here.
Yeah, but, cool. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, definitely Berlin is a great hub of crypto. All right. Well, thanks for listening to this episode of WTF Web3, where we focus on separating the crypto utility from the bullshit. I hope you liked today's show. We hope to bring you a new show really soon. Please subscribe, give us any kind of feedback. Tell us what you would like to see, and we'll make sure that we do everything we can to bring that content to you.